So the thing about Rogan, dude, he is an interesting guy. When you're around him, he manages to keep himself so fucking normal. Like, you were around him. He's a guy who's worth probably $500 million. He's the trends on Twitter every day. He's one of the most famous people on the planet. And then he goes to the Vulcan Gas Company and does a 45-minute comedy set.
Yeah.
And then he like hangs out and people talk. Here's the thing. Like, I was never, for some strange reason, I've done the show. I was never intimidated. Like, even the first time, the only thing was I was a little nervous. I wanted it to go good. Right?
Yeah.
But what are you saying?
I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of money. He knows jiu-jitsu, but you could also put him on a swing set.
He did something about that, though. He made himself into a hard man. A lot of times, that's a lot of the motivation behind it. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the motivation sometimes, Sometimes you go to Great Adventure and they say, you got to go, and you go, okay, I'm going to kick you in the face now. Yeah. He's not a tall guy. But he's probably got a sense of humor about that too. Usually those short guys, they become like fucking tyrants, Usually they go the other way. But he's so comfortable with himself and calm and very smart, but in a Socratic way. Like, he's not like making a lot of sense. And he keeps himself like very humble. And by the way, he made jokes about like, hey, don't take vaccine advice from me. I'm fucking, I'm a comedian. Like, he would say, I did shows with him where he said that. But also a lot of the things that he had questions about, he wasn't all wrong. Like, he wasn't all wrong. Mm-hmm. Two things that stand out in my mind are, where's the message about health? Where's the message about like boosting your immune system through health? It was killing only fat and old people. So you're going like, how come you're not saying like, and this whole thing that you're going to avoid the virus and like, it's like, obviously the vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting it and all these things. Now, granted, I know they didn't know everything and they were learning as they go, but how come they were not considering a previous infection vaccination? Because a vaccination is a simulated infection. It's not as good as an infection. An infection is the best thing that can happen. So who people were infected, why were they saying you should also be vaccinated?
Great
now,
points.
I understand the waning immune system, waning immunity and all that bullshit and the different strands and stuff, but I'm not talking about that. It's like those are that speaks to boosters. Those are voluntary. And look, also, the vaccine was always, for the most part, voluntary, except for those people who were fucking laid off because they weren't vaccinated, even if you had a previous infection. That's bullshit. That's fucking bullshit. Now, it's a private company. You make a decision. You want people to be vaccinated because it mitigates the spread of the virus and lessens people's sickness and protects older people and all that shit, and you're not scared of science, and that's what your private company fucking decides, fine. Or if your particular legislature votes for that, that's democracy. I get that. I'm not arguing against that. I see both sides of that argument, and I say they have the freedom to do that. Whether right or wrong, they have the freedom to do that. What I am saying is, why was a previous infection not considered vaccinated status? Was it because it's hard to prove? Maybe that. But like, what are you going to do? Is this Nazi Germany where you're going to stamp everyone?
Yeah, but people can print out fake cards too. So
exactly.
Like that system was a little bit fraudulent as well.
Great point. That's a great point. So like, why not? So the whole thing, and then the masks, it's like, we found out that the only thing that works is the KN95 mask. I mean, something's better than nothing. They say blah, blah, blah. But then we all have friends who are fucking walking around with masks and they got it like 3 times. So it's like, what are we doing? And also the mask is just prolonging the inevitable. If this thing is going to be around forever, it's like you're prolonging the inevitable. You want people to get infected. So ultimately, herd immunity is the goal. Sweden, big picture, was right. In the short term, they pay dearly with lives, but like, they're Swedish. They're going to fucking commit suicide in the winter anyway. So it's like, we're going to slow down the economy, to save them for the summer? which over there is only like a month and a half, and then they fucking kill themselves in January anyway. Either they die by chewing on a gun or a fucking virus that fell out of a fucking factory. Out of a fucking laboratory. Allegedly. He wasn't all wrong, dog. And people were like treating him just because he had these questions. You know, now, did he have a couple of questionable people on there, like the guy who claimed to invent the RNA vaccine? Then you read it and he like wrote one paragraph in a paper. Yeah. Did he overstate his contribution to creating mRNA? That guy Maloney, who now, where's that guy? Where's all the dark intellectuals now? Or that guy Weinstein, you know, who's like a fucking sociologist who all of a sudden was talking about fucking virology? Yeah. Could he have had a few other guys who were epidemiologists and virologists on there to say a little bit more? Yeah, he could have, but it's his personal podcast. He does what he wants. And he wasn't all wrong about a lot of shit. And also context. There was a time where it's like, hey man, the reason why we did the lockdowns is because the hospitals were overrun. Now, depending on if you ask someone in the medical profession who we all lean on and depend, they were like, yeah, we had to do it. The fucking hospitals were being overrun. You know, I spoke to a lot of people at hospitals because I spent some time in there. And they were like, yeah, people don't understand. They're not here. They're not on the ground. They don't know the difficulties we're facing when we're putting bodies outside and shit like that. You have to do a temporary lockdown to slow that up or else the system just gets overrun. Or like Jesse suggested, you could build more apparatus outside, but that becomes a challenge. You got to train more healthcare staff. It was a fucking mess. I'm saying nobody knew everything, you know, but it's like he was fucking completely demonized, but he wasn't like anti-vax, you know? His parents got vaxxed. Like, he decided not to. It's ridiculous. And then Novak Djokovic can't play in a fucking thing. He had a previous infection. He had COVID. So it's like, it gets a little weird. And then people got laid off because they wouldn't get the vax. It's just a little weird if they had a previous infection. My point is, why was a previous infection not considered vaccination status? That's my question. And also, the lockdowns, the way they were, obviously, probably were some mistakes happening there, state by state. But again, you got to put everything into context. And like Taylor Lorenz is still, this is how people toe the line. Like, there's a big fucking protests all over China right now, all over China, where they've had enough. And if you think the United States ain't supporting those protests, you got another thing coming, because you woke up a giant sleeping bear, you little commie redders. And now the United States does what it does best. We get the military-industrial complex pumping, and we get our subterfuge and our CIA intelligence cooking, and we're supporting what they call the opposition. If you don't think we don't got any fucking influence on the ground with these protesters, you gotta know what's coming.
Spies in China, how you put change in kangaroos.
Exactly. So Taylor Lorenz, was dragged because Taylor Lorenz is, she's the crying journalist who likes the whatever. Who cares? But she got mad that someone was against the lockdowns in China, so she towed the line and stuck with it as if context doesn't matter. For context, even Fauci is against the China lockdowns at this point, because at this point, we're 3 years in, there's vaccines. China's got their vaccine, but apparently we didn't give them our vaccine because they got their Chinatown vaccine. They got their Canal Street version. They got the Snikey version. They got the fake Gucci bag vaccine. So what happened is that Pfizer was going to make a deal with China to give them the vaccine, right? Because obviously China, they like selling vaccines too, right? But we got the dope vaccine. We got the dope technology. But China, in a very CCP-like way, did not want the vaccines. Jesse, what did they want? They wanted the intellectual property of the vaccines so they could make their own. And we said, this ain't pre-pandemic no more. We know who you are. We know what you're up to. And you're not getting our fucking intellectual property. Either you buy our vaccines and give us some more money, or good luck. So they didn't take it. Because what China really wants is the technology. They want to know how we made it, but we wouldn't tell them. Is that essentially what happened?
That's right.
Because China wants the technology to make their own, because they always want to compete with us. And we're like, we got the upper hand. We got the vaccines. Either you take our vaccines and try to figure it out later, well, bye-bye. We're not handing over the blueprint to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you want to do business in China, you can't just open up. You have to share your intellectual property with them.
Right.
That's part of the deal. You want access to their market, they got to know your secrets, basically.
Okay, well, guess what, China? Them days is over. My Nikes were made in Sri Lanka. You jumped the shark. China overplayed their hand, and I think America has had enough. Not only America, NATO. It's a lot of countries and a strong force. And now the CCP party is going to be under a lot of pressure because what starts to happen is all these countries that were doing business with China, they stop doing business with China. Guess what happens? The gravy train stops. So guess what happens when the gravy train stops? People get upset. They start going, hey, what's going on, President Z? Why are things not awesome like they were a couple years ago? And President Z goes, because of us. They hate us. And then the people go, okay, well, now we're going to storm your fucking palace and put your head on a spike. And we sit there and we go like this and enjoy it truly and watch it happen and go, that's what you get for fucking with the red, white, and blue.